Okay, welcome everyone to our May IIIF community call. If this is the first one that you are attending, welcome. I have put a link to our agenda in the chat. If you can take just a moment and sign in so we have a sense of who has attended, that would be great. I will also do my best to take notes and put our questions and answers in there. We hold these calls almost every month. We will skip June because we have our in-person conference, but they're an opportunity for the IIIF community to get together to talk about new developments, demo new tools and implementations, have technological discussions, all sorts of things that are of interest to the folks in the big, wide IIIF community. Today we are going to welcome the chairs of the pretty new IIIF Accessibility and Usability Community Group to talk about their Ideas Box. But before we jump into that, a couple of housekeeping notes. This is a pretty small group. I suspect that we'll have a few more people trickle in as they find the Zoom. But if you have questions, we will have time for a Q&A at the end. You are free to unmute and ask your question. If you're afraid you're going to lose track of it or you just don't want to unmute, feel free to type it into the Zoom chat and I will read it out at the end. And before I turn it over to Brittany, Meredith, and Stacy, I want to remind everyone that registration for the annual conference happening next month will close tomorrow. So if you are planning to join us in Amsterdam, Leiden, and The Hague, tomorrow's the last day to get your registration in. Okay, and with that, I will turn it over to Stacy, Brittany, and Meredith.
I will kick us off. My name is Meredith. I work at the Hood Museum of Art of a very long title, but functionally I'm the head of digital. My background is as a sort of a database person on the configuration, user support, and training side of things, but I do also have a background as an archivist and a museum registrar. And I will hand it over to Stacy to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stacy Reddick. I am a product manager, mostly working on museum and library products. And I have been, I think I've been the co-chair of at least two of the iterations of this community group. And I was a member of the original Discovery for Humans group as well. So I have a long history with usability, UX, and et cetera at IIIF. Brittany?
Hi, my name is Brittany Lapierre. I'm the manager of development at Sierra Can. So I tend to work on Canadiana.ca, which is a historical library website. My background is in all forms of development, so full stack, but I do really, really love UX and accessibility, so hence I'm part of this group.
All right. So just wanted to, before we sort of jump into what the Idea Box is, we wanted to introduce sort of who the accessibility and usability group is. So the accessibility and usability group is committed to authoring, collecting, and sharing recommendations for creating accessible and user-friendly IIIF compliant resources and interfaces. Our mission is to ensure the success and widespread adoption of IIIF tooling. I can't read my own notes. The design of IIIF compliant resources, tools, and interfaces must be people focused. Obviously, we have people using them in the first place, and they need to meet clearly defined needs. And to support these efforts, we actively engage with experts in usability, accessibility, and human-computer interaction, as well as institutions, individuals, and end users of IIIF tooling. And to enhance access to content, our goal is to basically advocate for user-centered strategies that encompass all areas of digitization and IIIF content consumption. And we want to improve the discovery, use, and reuse of IIIF resources across institutional and domain silos.
Okay, so we created the Idea Box to provide a centralized spot for anyone really in the community to share feedback or problem areas or questions with folks who might be able to help. And we also wanted to provide a centralized spot for those folks who may be able to help to access and view and respond to these suggestions and questions. You'll notice that I have words like gatherers, educators, and builders here. And that is because several years ago in 2021, the previous iteration of this group, the design community group, conducted research with community members and put them into 4 audience categories, who we're calling gatherers, educators, adopters, and builders. And this is not it's not set in stone about how we're going to think about our audiences, but it does help the usability and accessibility community group think about the community members and what they might need as we do our activities. Okay, this was a slide that here we go. It's too fancy. So these are just a few points about each of the different personas that we developed. I'm going to leave these here. I think, Caitlin, the slides will be shared at some point somewhere. This information is also available elsewhere on, I believe, the website. So this is just a quick refresher. You can scan it if you like, but I will not be going through all of it. Okay. So the Idea Box came about because we have been hearing from different community members that there isn't really a space to share feedback or to ask questions if they're not technical and not engaged in the GitHub. So we wanted to create a simple place/interface where people could easily and quickly document their question or problem area that would also have enough information or enough questions for people who would view it and maybe look into it to understand what was needed or what the question was. We especially wanted to make sure that our non-technical community members would feel comfortable using it. So we did not put it, we tried to make it as low tech as possible. And we also wanted to make it easy for the developers or who we're calling builders to find suggestions and use them as inspiration, respond to them, or initiate a conversation. And that is why this is composed of 2 different pieces, just a basic form and a GitHub project board. So the form will be where community members can submit their questions, and then the GitHub project board will keep track of everything. So hopefully it's easy for anybody who wants to keep track of it to do that on the other end. And yes, we have a note here. We did talk with the IIIF Ambassadors Group and the Education Group at least once, probably multiple times, to provide feedback for how this all was going to work. So we wanted today to be an exploration of how this might work. So we'll do a little bit of showing of the Idea Box and the project board, and then we wanted to get right into maybe some collaborative community work and see if anybody had any suggestions so we could fill out the form and maybe look at the GitHub and go from there. Before we do that, you don't have to know how to use GitHub to fill out the form. It will be more broadly available, at least on the community webpage, community group webpage, but also potentially elsewhere. We, as the co-chairs, will be reviewing all of the submissions that are submitted through the form, just to make sure that we can sort of direct these questions and questioners to helpful people or locations if needed. And we wanted to make sure that people don't feel like they submitted a question in the idea box and it just got like thrown in the trash or, filed away somewhere. So we wanted to, yes, make those reassurances. I think before we ask if we have any submissions, I'm going to attempt to move away from the slides. Can you all see the submission form now? Great, thank you. Okay, so there's just a little bit of intro text here. You can read it later. But once you start, there's a general question about what your challenge is. There is a question about what you're trying to accomplish. Why did this question come up for you? We've asked for a number of selections. I think, is it multiple? It's just one. Sorry, guys. So what is it your idea most closely relates to in terms of these general features or areas of IIIF? And then we're asking you to think a little bit about who the audience is that would benefit from the answer to this question. Finally, if you feel like it, we ask you for feedback on the survey. So that's the form itself, as simple as we could make it. And then once you submit a form, it's going to end up in this GitHub project board, which is based on a Kanban format, I believe. And you can see all of the different phases of work here. We do have one template submission. Which just has fill in the blank. It just has like prototype answers. So this is what it's going to look like. And then we have also completed some further tests of the submission. So with all of that, I think the first thing to do is to ask if anybody has any questions about anything we've shared up to this point. That sounds like a no. Caitlin, did you want to say something?
No, so someone's filling out the form in real time. So we'll see. If any questions
Oh,
arise, like I said, you can put them in the chat and I will read them out when we're not, as to not interrupt the flow.
awesome.
Day two, my automation that I set up between the form and the GitHub will run every 15 minutes. So you won't see your, or maybe you'll be lucky and you'll submit right before it runs, but you probably won't see your submission until at most about 15 minutes after you've submitted. But I can open up my automation thing for this and press run, and it should be quicker.
Okay. So does anybody have any like challenges, obstacles, or questions you've run into as you've been working with IIIF that you want to test out on the form that you want to share with the community? One of the things that we have been talking about also is how questions might be more for the framework and the cookbooks or specific tools. And I don't think that we have separated that out here, but if there are questions that are related to specific tools, we do plan on figuring a way to get those to the developers of the tools or the owners of the tools if they're not actively engaging and checking the GitHub. So if you do have a question about a specific tool, that doesn't mean that it's just going to sit around in the GitHub waiting for somebody to pick it up. We will try to actively talk to the people who are responsible for the areas where you have questions. All right. If nobody has any ideas off the top of their heads. Brittany or Meredith, do you guys have anything you'd want to add, maybe from our conversations with the ambassadors or educators?
I'm trying to pull up the notes from the educators because I feel like there was a lot there.
I see a question in the chat. How do you plan to distribute this form within the IIIF community or outside?
I have not considered sharing it outside of the IIIF community. I think at the end of this presentation, Brittany's going to go over a few of the methods and ways we've discussed sharing it. But I believe those are all within the IIIF community.
Yeah, the two main methods that we've been discussing are sharing it with the community groups themselves, such as Ben, you, and Chris, and the museum's community group, and the other more end user focused community groups. So the leads could share out the form when they're in different community calls, as well as the ambassadors too. So the IIIF community has ambassadors who often will hold local events in their communities. So we're envisioning them kind of being able to use this form within their different workshops that they hold, because a lot of the time, even Caitlin too, they'll get questions, but they don't really have anywhere to just easily say, oh, just fill out this form, instead of maybe Caitlin grabbing a notebook and scribbling down what they're trying to tell her right away. And then lastly, there was another, Glenn was thinking maybe to introduce it as a method after his intro to IIIF training that they have. So inviting people learning how to use IIIF after they've first gone through the course, to see what kind of ideas that they might have, especially if they're non-technical, if they're an archivist or some other more adopter type user, what kind of things they could see digital media being useful for in the IIIF context. So those are the different ways that I remember.
Brittany, do you want to just go through the what's next slide now, and then we can go
Oh,
back to
yeah,
the
for
form?
sure.
Yeah.
So the general idea is that we're going to get submissions throughout the next half a year to a year-ish. We're going to have a little scheduled time during the plenary to kind of go over this in more of a lightning talk. We'll be reviewing and responding to any submissions that come in the next half a year or so. And then we're hoping to schedule a hackathon for IIIF builders to go in and actually implement on ideas that are coming from the community. Other than that, other than this idea box, we have a couple other projects going on. One of them is a accessibility best practices for manifest guide that we're looking to add onto the IIIF website. We ended up doing a lot of research kind of to mimic the way that EPUB type file formats have accessibility guidelines for people creating and publishing via EPUB. We're trying to do something similar with manifests. So if you're packaging your content together as a manifest, what can you do and what data can you add to it to help tools developers who develop tools to view those manifests to render them accessibly to end users. And then otherwise, we have a pretty exciting plan to create tangible and easy to implement UX and accessibility resources for the community. And that can be something like a kind of like UX paradigm sort of list of set of guides. So if you're going to include a link to a IIIF item, make sure that it's with the IIIF logo and that you can click and drag it to add it to different IIIF toolings, for example, things like that. And that should eventually be available on the IIIF website as well. We also have monthly open community calls where we either have a presentation or we're just working together on something as related to our project work. and everybody's welcome to join them. So they're on the IIIF community calendar for you if you're interested.
Thanks, Brittany. Meredith, did you by chance find an educator challenge?
Um, yes, that I was looking at a recent agenda. It looks like Scalar is a significant challenge for folks. I was specifically looking at the one that Brittany that you attended. So I know there was Scalar, and then there was integrations with Gemini were some more. So let me go back and find that. It was the March
And if you want to,
meeting.
you can chime in if you have better wording for those issues that were discussed in the community calls.
Yeah. So it looks like there's some frustrations with scalar annotation. I don't know. Um,
Ben, do you have something you want to share?
yeah.
That sounds like Chris's input, Chris Gilman in the education group, who uses Scalar quite heavily.
Mm,
Um, so that may raise a good question. Scalar is not a triple IF tool per se. It's got some triple IF functionality, um, but it does raise the question of the scope of the types of questions people might submit to this system.
We're hoping that this form will actually be kind of generative research. So if it's feeding a hackathon, maybe somebody, if Scalar is open source, somebody could implement something that's missing in there, or maybe just a new tool. For example, I know Canopy as well is a really popular kind of similar sort of thing. Maybe the developers of Canopy could get more use cases from this form feedback to augment their tool with new features, for example.
Okay, so we
One
got
other
But
this.
then do
question
you have,
oh,
oh, sorry,
sorry.
go ahead.
One other question, just a quick one that I put in the chat is this form anonymous, or is there any way to track down the person who may have asked the question?
That's interesting. No, we've made it purposefully anonymous. And maybe Stacy and Meredith, because we had lots of discussions of this. You can use your memories into as to why.
Yeah, I always come back to privacy. I think if you feel like sharing your information that, this is just a text box, you can fill it in very easily and say like, please attach my name or contact me if anything is done about it or if anybody wants to respond to my question. But we thought the balance should way more on the side of privacy than in contacting people because we are giving people a way to track their submissions. Now, I understand that that is a little bit in conflict with our idea that people won't have to go to GitHub. Um, but yes, there might be some figuring we still have to do on that. But we did want to make sure that people had the privacy if they wanted it.
I think, yeah, that about sums it up. I think also sometimes as probably the least technical member of this group, and existing in the in-between space between very technical people and not technical people, um, there is also an intimidation factor, quite frankly. Like sometimes when I am talking, I'm always like, oh gosh, please don't perceive me. So there's also that element of like a little bit of safety of asking a question without feeling a little silly. But certainly, I guess because there is a feedback on the form itself, like if there is more of an appetite for opting in to share your contact information because you do want to have a conversation, I think that that's pretty easily implemented.
And I think one other thing that we can do is be transparent about when we're going to talk about issues in community calls and things. So if we're going to have a community call and we're going to discuss one or two of the tickets in the GitHub project, then, before the community call, we can share out a message that says the community call is coming up and we're going to talk about these 3 ideas that came up in the GitHub. And that way, if submitters are paying attention to Slack, at least, that would be another way to find out that they're going to have that there's movement on their suggestions. Okay. Is there any appetite today for working through this in a test sort of way, or does anyone want to share a challenge? Have you thought of anything yet? If not, we can close out this part of the call.
Daniel submitted the form, and I put a link to their submission in the chat.
Oh, we need to work on titles.
I figured we can title them later.
Yeah, looks like it. I'm guessing it's 21, right? Because that's the second, that's higher than 20, Brittany?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So, Daniel, do you want to talk about this one, or do you want me to read through it, or should we just leave it?
Hello. Hello.
Hi there. Okay. There you are. Oh, Daniel, I'm sorry, you're on mute. Were you going to talk about it, or?
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted me to talk or if you wanted to read and test the flow of the submission.
Why don't you go ahead and talk about your challenge?
Sure. So the easiest way to explain the way I envision this, and I feel that there's quite a bit of crossover with the IIIF community. I've been kind of reading a lot of your stuff for probably the last 4 years or something now. But in the meantime, at university, what I was trying to do was build. I don't know if anyone here has ever watched the movie The Matrix, but Neo, when he's in his training room, the construct, and he's saying, "Oh, I want guns, lots of guns," right? And inside a three-dimensional world, a room starts loading in, and all the guns start getting placed in front of him, so he can pick something up, right? Now, the way I envisioned digital preservation in the future is that you could pick up tangible objects, get a sense of scale. So say, for example, if my son was to come to me and say, "Oh, I'd like to see a Tyrannosaurus bone," or something like that. Museums and places have these artifacts in basements. They have complex things to simple things like coins. And with the emergence of LiDAR data, we have the ability to scan objects and refine them to be streamlined into 3D applications like Unreal, virtual reality systems, and not just web browsers. So the thing that I find really good, it's almost like a gold standard really, is the archival sciences that you've done in IIIF with all the metadata and the stuff that can be attached to artifacts. But I haven't seen a lot when it comes through like real-time streaming. So I'm a systems architect by trade, and I've rewrote a fair bit of the Unreal Engine so I can bring in objects in real time from an API, if that makes sense, and package them locally. And then ideally, if you had like people like yourself, like a curator who physically got the bone, you scanned it, you've got like 80% accuracy, it's marked by Dr. Samuel Dinosaur Man, and it's at this date, and it all comes in. So then if I was to be in the room with my son in virtual reality and go, "This is a dinosaur bone from America, look how big the fibula of a T-Rex is," because a screen can't portray that, but virtual reality can, if that makes sense. And whether you're just doing coins, which are fairly two-dimensional, or really complex things like intricate pottery, the way in which to capture and refine that LiDAR data becomes a bit more complex, and only the AI tools to automate it is only so far. But I kind of push that to the side, and what I've been mainly focusing on is just the way that you can do, I call it PSTA, provably safe, trust aware system, where the data that's coming in from, say, IIIF Museum A in America, it's X% accurate. So it could, that metadata and the visual thing in front of you, it almost gives you like a sense of truth that you could almost reference in the three-dimensional visual world, if that makes sense. And it's been a long-winded project for me, and I'm making a lot of progress. But I just kind of wanted to open it out because I saw this post about pitching ideas and things like that. And I'm getting closer to being able to like demo it all by myself, basically, at this moment in time. So I was just wondering, where is like IIIF going in this space, if that makes sense, the three-dimensional, arguably four-dimensional space.
That's a fascinating idea. Very cool. I think so that first of all, how was the submission experience briefly?
I just did it quickly. I didn't
Yeah.
flesh it out as much as I wanted, but the form online was great. The only thing that I would suggest is at the end of it, make another one going, do you want to be contactable? What's your
Yeah.
email address or something like that? Because then if someone did like my idea, then they would know how to contact me and it wouldn't just get lost in a Git link that I wasn't linked to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I think and we can make it not required, obviously, so you don't have to fill it out if you don't really want to be contacted. That's a good idea. So like the first thing that comes to mind here is that the 3D group might be very interested in talking with you about it. And if we could get the 3D group folks to see this board, then they might scan it occasionally and like come back to or you know we would facilitate that with our monthly bi-weekly reviews of the submissions. But yes, now that there's this GitHub, you know, potentially we can connect the both of you about this idea. Thank you for sharing.
That I've been quite isolated in doing this kind of solo because I kind of feel like I'm a bit of a madman trying to do this on my own because I pitched this to my local university and they said it was too complex for a PhD. So I basically just said, sod it, I'll do it on my own while being a full-time father, while doing everything else. And I'm really lucky at the moment because the way AI agents and programming is coming along, like last year I was offloading about 20% of my programming. Now it's about 50, 60% roughly. And I'm finding it hard between the structure and the lines, if that makes sense, because what I perceive as truth isn't necessarily what is mathematically true. And it's almost like for me to go further, I need to be challenged by real humans, if that makes sense.
It does. Thanks again for sharing. Caitlin, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, just that, Daniel, I will send you an email after this because, like Stacy mentioned, you should be in touch with the IIIF 3D group because there already are IIIF dinosaur bones that have been rendered, and there's lots out there, and there's people who will want to talk to you about this. So look, the project worked. We did the ideas box, and Daniel had an idea, and we're going to get him right where he needs to go.
Nice, thank you. And if possible, I'd love to speak to an archivist on how the JSON structure is created for the metadata behind the three-dimensional object. Because the problem now is I'm defining schemas which work in my simple use cases, but ideally what I want to do is make a schema which is almost generic enough for every object in human history. That's my next like 6-month year goal.
Very
So it's the
cool.
3D aspect and the logging aspect of it, because if the logging aspect isn't clear, then any API or any service system we have to host terabytes, potentially petabytes of models, if that structure isn't grounded in to begin with, we're going to have so much backlog in the future of the work. So I need understanding not only of the three-dimensional rendering aspect, but also like the librarian, you know, like how you fill in all the forms so that when you know to go to that drawer in the real world, it has to mimic it in the digital world, but on arguably a much bigger scale.
Metadata schemas have never been easy.
They're not. They're really difficult, actually.
Yeah. Do we have interest in doing a similar thing for the submission number 22? Does the owner of that want to share?
Is that Teresa's?
Is that mine? I think that might be me. I love the idea of I'm number 22. That's just my identity now. Yeah. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Some of you know me, some of you don't. I'm Teresa Berger. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Interactive 2D community group. And so I threw this in here because it's something that came up during one of our calls last month, where we essentially realized that a solution maybe already exists for the problem, but it's not necessarily well documented. And I thought maybe that might be a good use case for what you all are trying to do. If I'm wrong, please let me know. Yeah. But yeah, essentially we were talking about stereographs and how there's two images on a card, on a, a stereographic card, and how a lot of people have tried to, some people have put out, websites and demos where you can kind of show the two images moving together and to get the one overlapping image the way you would see it within an actual stereographic viewer. And so I think people have demonstrated this over the years, and it's something that maybe is buried in a GitHub, or I don't know. I know it's come up in the context of IIIF before, but we just didn't have a good way of pointing to it and referencing it. So Glenn was actually in this call and had suggested that maybe a recipe would be the way to go. So I wanted to kind of document that.
No, that's great. I'm a huge fan of documentation, and having this, having this issue, we can go back to the cookbook folks, connect with them directly and make this request with like more details than maybe we would have if we were just talking about it, right? So great. Same question for you. How was the submission process?
I thought it was pretty painless. I think the question of which of the following areas would match, I kind of guessed and took a stab at it. So hopefully, I don't know like what the point is of that data collection, but I think maybe there could have been more than one way to answer it. So just a thought on that sense. And then also same thing that was said previously by Daniel. I think a contact option would be great too, because I could point you to the people that brought this up and more of the information that I have, but I didn't want to necessarily put them in here publicly.
Yeah, that's great feedback. I'm glad you guys have had a chance to review the form and let us know. That's helpful.
Yeah, but thanks for doing this. I think it's a really great idea.
Great. Yeah, hopefully it continues to work the way it started. It's gone off to a pretty good start, I think. Brittany or Meredith, is there anything that you want to add? And then anyone else, do you have any final questions that are either in the chat and I haven't seen, or you haven't had a chance to ask yet?
No, I think just sort of echoing what Brittany said to Ben is that for those folks who are able to physically attend, if you can help evangelize a little bit, because, attending conferences past where people have pitched things and not really knowing where it's gone, we're really hoping to sort of fix that portion of things as much as possible. So if people are there and they can have sort of healthier mouthpieces, that would be awesome.
Seconded. Okay. So maybe a quick refresher, because we did go over this earlier, that we are going to continue reviewing and responding to submissions and like forwarding connections. We will add the non-required contact info field to the submission. So for those of you who want to be contacted, you can put your info there. I think Brittany will need to figure out a quick line about where that information is going to be shared and how open it is. Like there might be the GitHub might be very open. And you will hear a pre-recorded us at the plenary of this year's conference, and then keep an eye out for the future hackathon. In the meantime, if you want to attend any of the community calls and either bring up a new suggestion or go through your suggestions or other suggestions in the box with us, please feel free to do that. And I don't have the schedule, but our community calls are on the community call calendar on the website. And keep an eye out for the guides that we'll be putting on the website as well.
Next community call is Thursday the 21st at 10 Eastern US time.
Great. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I think we are done.
Yeah, I think we're set. We kind of did Q&A while we were presenting, but I will, if there's any last minute questions, I'll give people just a minute. Okay. To reiterate what Brittany and Stacy and Meredith said, the community group calls, so the accessibility and usability community group calls are open to anyone. So please feel free to take a look at the IIIF community calendar for a time that works for you to drop in. And you will be seeing more of the Ideas Box. I will mention it and show the demo during the plenary at this conference, but it's also something that you'll probably see popping up at future events. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me or any of the members of the group, and I hope we'll see many of you at a future call.
And thanks everyone for listening and participating.
Thank you.
Hey.